Hey everybody! So our past posts have been on electricity and water. They've focused on how challenging life can be when things like that are just unreliable. Today we're going to focus on our waste management situation, starting with our backyard, which is where we're sitting. I know it looks like a dump, but it's not. It's our backyard. And just how eye-opening it's been living amidst our own waste.
First off, I've got to give the people huge credit for being incredibly resourceful. Anything that's the slightest bit reusable, any type of glass or plastic container, is going to be used for holding water, for cooking ingredients, and they're going to reuse and reuse it until it's broken. And even then, people get creative and find cool ways to use that stuff. Anything organic that doesn't get eaten is going into a compost pile for fertilizer or straight to the pig trough. They really use up every last bit of everything usable. Unfortunately, even after you sort out all of that stuff, we're still left with a pretty sizable heap of trash.
So what happens with that trash? That's the scary part. There are municipal garbage trucks, but their schedule is just unreliable. We didn't see it for our first 2 months living here. The first time we saw it, we yelled and got their phone number, so now if we call them and bug them enough, they'll stop by a little more regularly. But even so, it presents a huge problem because if it's not consistent, you can't take advantage of the service because you have to be home when they come by to give them their trash. You can't just leave it by the side of the road because we're a rural community. And if you left something by the side of the road, the livestock and the animals will just tear it apart and spread it far and wide. And if you were to leave your trash in a sturdy container to keep them out, you just wouldn't do that because containers like that are just too valuable and expensive to be used for trash.
It gets worse though. If you do manage to catch the garbage truck and get it hauled away to the dump, well, frankly, the dump here is just in total disarray. The best way they found to manage the volume of waste coming in to keep it from blowing free or overflowing out of the dump is to burn it. So it puts off these nasty fumes, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but first, when it's so hard to get your trash picked up by the garbage man, and even that doesn't seem like that great of a solution, people just resort to the easiest thing, which tends to be just littering it in the street, or as our neighbors do here in our backyard, just burning it.
So the dangers of those options are being taught in the schools now, and a lot of people do understand the dangers they propose. But when you're living in the midst of it like this, it's just so overwhelming. And so people resort to the bad habits they grew up with. And it's really frustrating, but when you're in a community where people have to worry about getting enough food to eat and having enough clean drinking water, you understand how other priorities just fall to the wayside.
But we haven't given up hope. And it's been really cool to see the response from the community we've gotten as we presented some creative ideas to clean it up. I'll be the first to say I was far from an environmentalist by any stretch of the imagination before coming here. But I just can't stress enough how much it changes your perspective when you have to live in the midst of the litter and the burning trash. It just really refocuses your priorities and makes you realize how important that stuff is. I recently started an environmental club in the high school. We've been going around the community picking up trash, explaining why it's dangerous and how we're going to use that trash to create some more sturdy trash receptacles. And everybody's getting really excited about it. It's encouraging to see.
Here I am in front of the dump, just a couple of miles from the entrance of our town.
Needless to say, we didn't want to spend any more time there than we had to. But we wanted to share it with you because not to point out how bad the dump is in our community, but just to point out how bad dumps are everywhere.
Before I had to live here, I had never really stopped to think about where all my trash goes. It had just disappeared. But it's prompted me to sit down and do some research. And from what I read, the dumps in the U.S. are much better managed than this, at least nowadays. But they still definitely pose big risks to the environment and the communities they serve. And I hope that the images of our dump can be a graphic reminder for everybody that the waste, the piles and piles of waste that we create every day that disappears is still posing a risk to ourselves, our neighbors, and to our planet.
So we're wrapping up. This will be the end of our series on basic services. So we're excited to show you guys other aspects of life here, especially updates on our projects we've got going on. We're loving every minute of it, even though parts are just so challenging, and sometimes feels like the hardest thing we've ever had to do. But it's definitely given us a newfound respect for the privilege we've been fortunate enough to grow up with, specifically the ability to focus on our education and careers, because we had things like running water and electricity that we could count on and were reliable, especially when so much of the world it doesn't have services reliable like that, and they're having to devote so much of their energy to finding clean drinking water and waiting till the electricity comes on to do certain tasks. So I hope that we've succeeded in sharing some of that with you all. You're the ones who've put the world at our fingertips. So we miss you all, and thanks for following along.